And we are live. So yes, welcome to week 7 of Be the Catalyst for Change. Today's session is called, it is Transformation Happens in Relationships. I will argue to say that you can't sit on a mountaintop by yourself and transform, and some gurus might have a different opinion. But it's actually a relationship to everything. So it's relationship to humans and nature and like anything that's we see as separate from us. So let's do a little quick recap. Let me mute everyone real quick. Okay, and I'm going to do another view for everyone. There we go. All right, so we covered the 4th principle last time, which was service. And we talked about the survival context and how that applies in how we be in service, whether we're being right, being in control, looking good, or being safe, or avoiding pain. We watched a video of Abraham Hicks again about appreciation and a service and the value of aligning your vision with others and sometimes being in service to other visions or eventually your own. And we also watched a video about giving and paying it forward and the impact our actions can have. The homework was read chapter 9 on service, and the other optional homework was to go out of your way and be in service above and beyond what you already have planned this week. And the mentalism homework was notice what your real thoughts are when you choose service. Are you choosing from survival context, or are you choosing from the love context that we call love consciousness or love context? So let's hear a little bit. Did any of you actually choose to be in service beyond what was already kind of on your schedule? And this is one thing that sometimes happens without you planning it to happen. So think back on your week and think if you actually surrendered to something that you know, it wasn't on your schedule and it just sort of occurred for you. Did you notice how the survival context prevented or promoted you in being in service? Did you notice if you were trying to control or put your own spin on or manipulating with regards to service, like me buying the cranberry pomegranate instead of cranberry juice? Which is so funny because Erin asked me to get cranberry juice today again, and she's like, do not get anything but cranberry juice. Did anything else open up, or did you forget and get busy? So let's hear if you guys had anything come up this week around service or something that you can think about. And if you're on the phone, you could, I think it's star 8 to unmute. And if you otherwise, let's hear, raise your hand. You know we like to share on this call. I can always call you to call you out too, and then you have no choice. But I'll give you a little bit of choice. Anyone? Bueller? All right, there we go, Ruth. Ruth is going for it.
Okay. The first thing that comes to my mind is I had intuition told me to call a friend, and I had tried calling her before, and she wasn't answering, and so I called again Saturday. Her sister answered, and I thought, okay, something's up. Turned out that my friend had been ill. She'd been in the hospital for about a month and then just come home from rehab. So that's why she wasn't answering my calls. And so I asked her sister she thought she would want to visit her the next day. And she said, maybe. So I said, well, I'll call. So I did follow. I was tempted not to do it the next day because something else came up I really would have liked to have done. But I thought, okay, here's my chance to make sure I keep my word. And so I did, bought a garden plant and went over to visit her. So I'm just really happy that I followed my intuition to check things out.
Yeah.
And it was definitely, I didn't see it as survival thing. I felt it was from my heart, something I really wanted to do. So Another thing that came up, I really didn't have any plans for service this last week because all the projects I had been in, organized things, had come to an end. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just, I'll do what was suggested, was just to keep an open mind, or look to see if things come up. So I felt that my service was basically in listening and finding opportunities to listen. And yesterday, actually, I was playing cards with somebody, and just the two of us were there. And she got a telephone call and went into the other room to do it. So when she came back, I could tell something was up. And as it turned out, she did not. She says, "I really don't want to talk about it." So it's a long story, but mainly a significant other is trying to come back in my life. And I don't know what to do. So I thought, okay, she doesn't want to talk about it, so I'm not going to be right in getting her to talk about it. I'm just going to. And so she kept saying, I don't know what to do. I says, well, I'm just going to pray for you to be clear on it. And she says, oh, yeah, if you would pray for clarity, I would really appreciate that. That's so awesome. That's basically just standing in the clarity for her is what I'm doing. So, but I kept thinking, should I be trying to get her to talk more? I thought, no, let it go.
Awesome. Thank you, Ruth. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing sometimes just that surrender of like, I don't need to know more. I just want to be in service to this human being in this moment, and they're clearly saying what it is that they need. And then just being able to follow that, and trusting that we don't need to know everything, all the gossip, right?
Right.
Awesome. All right.
I have a question. Is going to somebody's party an act of service?
Depends. Do you like the person?
Well, I wanted to go, but I thought later is like, because someone was saying that he was hoping people would come, from a host point of view. So it just the thought came to me. Well, is that being in service to someone by going to their party too? Just thought.
It can be. I mean, it can be. Like. Yeah. You want to contribute, you come to contribute and like so I mean, really anything we do can be of service.
It's a give take. Yeah, it's give take.
And it's funny with something like that, going to a party, because you could actually, out of survival context, you could have a looking good thing, right, and you could go because people would be upset if you don't. Or you could also, stay home because you don't want people to see you. Like, there's so many different things that can play in. So I don't know. That's going to be individual, up to you, what you think it was for you.
I went for the fun.
Cool. And just doing that probably was contributing and being in service.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
So, awesome. All right. Sean, Jackie, Shania. All right, Jackie.
So we had Feast and Cradle on Saturday night, and so it was really a lot of fun.
Just remember, not everyone that listened to the recording have seen, so no details.
Right.
Okay.
No, but it was so it was a lot of fun, and because it tends to end a little late, I was like a little not super excited about it. But then, once you get there and once you're in service, everything changes. And that's what I've noticed about being in service, or my thoughts about it. Sometimes you start off kind of not as excited, but not in drudgery, but just kind of like, okay. And then once you kind of get into it and you're doing it, then it becomes a lot of fun, and you really have those connections. So it really, I think, turns into pure service.
Yeah. I had a similar thing for me yesterday too. We had a meeting with all the trainers in training, and I usually don't attend that meeting. And I decided that, I should just show up, because these are people that want to be trainers for my company, and I want to contribute to them as they're contributing to me. And and I ended up going. And, you know, I have to do a lot of shifting around to be gone from home during night times with, you know, the kid and everything. So it was actually really good. And you're so right. Like once I was there, I was just like all heart, all in, you know, but the leading up to it is like that little conversation that goes. So awesome. Okay. So sorry, I muted myself. Sean, do you got anything? I meant to mute Jackie and I muted myself.
I don't have a ton. I guess I got to be in service a little bit. My wife had to go out of town unexpectedly this week, so I was daddy duty all week. So that was it from service? Was it out of like looking good? It was probably a little bit of both at different times. Some of it was really great, and some of it was a little more challenging.
Some of it was probably you have no choice.
Right, exactly. These kids are going to get fed. I'm going to have to do it. So I guess that's what's going to happen. So yeah, there was a little bit of that, maybe a couple of opportunities at work that I didn't really think about, where I picked up some clients for some people that weren't necessarily expected of me to do. So I guess it was a little bit more than I thought until just coming on the call and looking back on things.
Cool. Living it. It's good. All right. So, Shania, you there?
Did you unmute her?
I did.
Okay.
All right. She might not hear us. Shania, are you there? Okay. We can't hear you. So maybe you are muted yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, no, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. So, last week, I was on my way here on Wednesday to Hawaii, and I have not listened to last week's recording, but my whole trip to Hawaii was in service, and I didn't even know that's what this was about. So I just want to say that this whole source thing, you guys sourcing for me to be here, I'm kind of blown away. At this moment.
Yeah, we intentionally did that for you.
So basically, my husband, he's been living in Hawaii for 2.5 years, taking care of his mom. It was his parents, but he's still here, and I'm in Northern Virginia. And I know some of you know that, but you know, we've been drifting apart, and we've been together, 31 years. So was our anniversary last weekend, and after I graduated, I felt this distance. And I wanted to come to Hawaii just to be with him because he dropped off the face of the earth, and that's never happened before. And last week, he actually answered the phone when I called, and I talked to him, and he said he wasn't doing good. And so I, typically would have went, oh, okay, been mad at him. Okay, that's what I typically would have been. And what I did instead was, figured out, and within 2 days I was on a plane over here. And it's the first time his mom's actually gone to his sister's in San Francisco. So it's the first time in 2.5 years that we've been together, just him and I, with no kids, no family, no holiday, and just normal, like get up in the morning and go to work kind of thing. And it's just been amazing. So, I thank you. I thank you so much. And I came here, I would have came because didn't answer my phone calls for a month. And in my old way of thinking, I would have came over here, got on the plane to bang on the door and find out what the F you're not answering my calls, and what are you doing? And I want to leave you if you don't straighten up. And this time it wasn't like that at all. It was, he was surprised. He got angry, but I just, made a commitment to love him and have compassion. And it's just been the most amazing feeling. Not easy necessarily, but the most amazing feeling I've had in my life.
Wow. That's great. Yeah, you fit into this call perfectly, even though you missed last week.
I definitely, this whole sourcing thing, I'm getting it. I really feel that you guys sourced for me, and I am so appreciative of that. So.
Yeah, and isn't it amazing too, like that when you actually are in an awareness space of, wow, I know how I normally, or my old self or my lower self would have reacted to the situation, and now you're aware that, wow, and I'm not reacting that way, and I actually have tools and choices to be in a different way. And then the results that are created based on that, and all that chatter and all the noise and the energy that we normally would have put out is just suddenly like there to access for other things,
Exactly. And it's just like, Ruth, what you were talking about, I didn't ask him what has he been up to the last month, and is he drinking, or is he doing this, or I wouldn't even went, are you having an affair before? We didn't even talk about the past. It was just in the moment. And he had a lot of things to say about gratitude. But, because what I got was he was being very, bottom line, for the first time, he's meeting a different person, the person that he actually knew and loved, and only he knew and loved.
Right.
And now others are seeing me show up that way. And so it's confusing. I can see that. But yeah. So I think, what was the name of this course? Catalyst for Change or something like that?
I mean, it's actually the whole purpose of the course is being source for, the world changing. And, it starts with our immediate family and ourselves and everyone around us. So yeah, that's powerful. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Cool. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to mute you. There we go. And we are going to put me up there. Oh, maybe not. There. Cool. All right, so today's session is about community, which is one of the things, sort of like one of the ingredients that I found immediately after starting the trainings, that this was a really like a pillar of what the world is about and what's needed in the world. And we've created an amazing gratitude community. And, communities are very deep and powerful conversation. So does anyone have any thoughts about community, or how you see community? Maybe even before you did the training, or now that you've done the training, have you seen like something different, and something that is either working or something that's not working, or, like what has community been for you so far? And I'd love to just hear a couple of you speak into that. And who wants to start? I know you're thinking. I can see Jackie. She looks up when she thinks.
I'm the same way.
I look down, and I blink a lot when I think. All right, so go for it, Jackie.
So I've had the privilege of having numerous communities that I've been in and felt safe and loved in. I went to a Baha'i international school in India. So there were kids in high school that were from all over the world. And it's funny because their countries could be warring, but the kids were like best friends. So it was just it was a safe place for a lot of kids who countries were not safe. So they were sent here to be safe. And we were all kind of going through hardships together. So I think that helps to cement and bring you closer together. And when you're, 13 or 14, you don't know what you're doing anyway. So it was really, just a sense of friendships that you'll have forever. Also in the Baha'i community, I have a lot of community and a lot of folks that I feel really close to and know I could call at 2:00 in the morning and they'll be there. And of course, in gratitude, you have this family and this community. In fact, our ML, we still are in our group me, and they've all adopted the last name, or most of them, Najafian. So we actually, ML11 has pew 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 has our last name. So we'll also be getting together, and they're like, okay, mom and dad, don't be mad, or whatever it is. So there really is an awesome sense of community. So I just feel blessed to be a part of so many communities.
Awesome. Thank you. And what about Ruth, Sean, or Jackie?
You mean Sean?
Oh, sorry, I meant Shania. Sorry, Jackie just spoke. Ruth, go for it.
I was trying to, I was, listening. I also have been blessed to be involved with different groups that I, considered my community. Church groups, the school district I worked in, knowing all the families and that. But one problem I've had with community is not feeling integrated, because I've lived in one community and worked in another. And so, and then especially when I retired and came back to, where I was, it's like, okay, where do I belong now? So that's, a sense of belonging, I guess, is very important to me when I seek community. And of course, ML, our gratitude train has definitely been the community where I feel like it's family, so.
So you said, like, if you belong to kind of two different communities, that there was like kind of a sense of separation, or like.
Yeah, that's probably coming from some limited belief or whatever,
It could be.
It's a feeling level, intellectually I'll feel like I'm connected, but something's missing within.
Well, is it because the communities were kind of close in nature, where you felt almost like, if you're over here, you feel guilty that you're not over there? Or was it more like they were so separate and different that you just felt like two different people? Like,
that's well,
what were the communities? Do you mind?
Two different. Yeah, I live in Ypsilanti now, in Washtenaw County, where Ypsi Ann Arbor area is. And that's always been like the intellectual world and community, the church. And then I worked in a township close to the airport, about 20 miles away. And that's where I knew everybody and was really integrated with the families, from a feeling level, I guess. So, and I'm not too sure what I'm saying.
No, I'm trying to support you by getting a little information. So,
yeah.
So when you were where you live and not in the old space, like in the intellectual community, let's call it, did you feel that it was going against who you felt you were in the other community, like on an internal level, or that you were betraying the other community, or that, you know, like, because they could both exist without there being a feeling of separation, right?
Both communities missed parts of me.
Okay.
You know, in my work world, in that community, they saw me as the professional, as the teacher, but not necessarily as the personal Ruth.
Got it.
And, you know, where I live now, it's like, you know, I would meet friends like neighbors, church members who would see me, you know, in a personal way, but they didn't see the career person. You know, so it was like I didn't feel like anyone was seeing the total person.
Got
And
it.
I just explained that to myself. You know? I'm not too sure that I quite understood that. So
I think I totally relate to this because I was a teacher for a very long time. And I think there's a level of professionalism with young people and with families. And so I learned to compartmentalize my life. And so, and I think that a lot of people may do this, you know, myself as a trainer, you as the owner of gratitude versus you as a mother and a wife, etc. But yeah, it's like on the one hand, I get to guard my reputation as a business professional. But on the other hand, you know, all the wishy-gushy stuff of being a mother, being a partner, being a sister, I was in the question of like, am I robbing people of that because I don't show that in my professional life? So I totally get that. And geographically, I did used to think about where would I live versus where do I work? Like, do I want to go out for happy hour with my friends and see my students having dinner like 3 tables away as I'm having a beer? It was awkward.
Right.
So I totally get what you're saying. Absolutely. Absolutely. With young people, especially.
Well, and it's actually a great conversation, and it kind of leads into what we're going to talk about. I'm going to mute you, Ruth. Okay. And Sean and Shania, do you have anything you want to add real quick before we kind of move on? No, Sean, you're good. Shania, anything?
I was just going to say that I've never been in a community other than work, and so I always felt before that people, you know, wanted me to be there, and I felt like they were wanting a piece of me. And now where I'm at is I feel like with the community that I'm actually getting pieces of other people now. So it's a real shift. And I don't feel obligated. I used to feel obligated too. And then I would beat myself up because I didn't, you know, I wasn't a community. But that's all.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because community or relatedness to others can actually heighten our survival context too. Like all the looking good, being in control, being safe.
Yeah.
All that stuff is now up. Because if you're just sitting at home watching a movie by yourself, like chances are not a lot of that is going to be active. I mean, other than Jackie's to-do list that she's worrying about. I'm just joking. So the way that I kind of look at it is that, you know, we teach in the training that we're whole, perfect, and complete. Okay, we basically just are, and we're actually nothing. We're no thing. I teach this in my transacting class that. You know, all these identities that we learn and take on, like doctor, mother, family, teacher, you know, whatever it is, kind of has us compartmentalized, to use your word, into accessing those at certain times, okay? The problem is when we make those identities, well, this is who I am, and then we go to another one that is another compartment, then we feel like we're not fully ourselves because we had to like close off maybe the teacher because now I'm in family, or I have to close. So it ends up being this kind of struggle inside. But the truth is you are none of those things and you are all of those things. And once we can sort of separate ourselves from the identity of it and just being like, it's just a role that I play in the in the game of life or the book that I'm writing or however you want to see it. It's just like a role that I'm playing to create a certain result. Okay. Then we don't have to be so attached to the fact that sometimes we have to smush some of them down because we're accessing something in the moment that's effective where we're at. So you're at school, you're in the intellectual environment community, and now you're accessing intellectual Ruth. And just because like the happy, joyous family Ruth is not present right then doesn't mean that you are not still that, right? So it's, I say that like at some point we actually decided unconsciously, most of us, that we are separate from God, whether it's at birth or whether it's when we're 7, like at some point there was this separation that occurred. It could have maybe even happened in a past life, depending on what you believe. But at some point there was like a decision, like I am separate from the all, right? Even like the Big Bang Theory, like the moment that everything became millions of pieces, it's like there's suddenly a distance and a space, and now the separateness, and there's a relatedness that comes with separation. And the moment that relatedness is there, now you're going to start identify with certain things, and instead of realizing that we are all of it, and I am you and you are me, and I am mother and I am, cat lover or whatever, all of it, right? So what happens in that decision of the separation is we actually forgot who we are. And who we are is that, meaning no thing and everything. We're all really related as one huge, and this is kind of a crazy big conversation, so you can take as much or as little as you want, but we're one. But the separateness is like an opportunity for our egos and our lower selves to make sure. Now I'm going to make sure that you do not know who you are and that you are one with everything. So the ego is going to start telling you all the stories of like, well, when I'm at work, I'm not really me because I'm not that fun pajama wearing person anymore. Of course you're not. You're at work. You're going to wear a suit or whatever, you know what I mean? But so the ego kind of wants us to have this conflict, this constant conflict of like, I don't know who I am, right? And that's like almost the goal of the ego. And so the reason I call it today is transformation happens in relationships is because it's in relationships that you can start seeing. I mean, I know many of you probably had moments in the trainings where you're like, holy moly, like I can see me in you, or whatever it is. And sometimes the people you have the most resistance to, and you're like, oh my God, that is what I do, or whatever. And so it's an opportunity in relationships to see yourself and see yourself who you truly are, and also see all those conversations come up. And with awareness, be able to go, is that really so? Is that really true? Like, a lot of times we put identities even as just our ground zero talk, which is like, I'm a bad lover or whatever. I'm just making stuff up now, but, or I am, it's hard to make money, or like whatever, all this like stuff that we put on as like becoming us. And then because we have those conversations, we don't want to even put anything else in, knowing that if we started shifting it, we would see the all, and we would have the effortless of life, we would have the abundance, we would have the connection, and all these things. So the egos kind of help us be afraid of all that perfectness and that love and that connection, okay? So that's actually going to bring us into a conversation that I love, which is her favorite.
It's really like one of my favorite of all time. Which
is actually community versus cult, okay? Community consciousness versus cult consciousness, okay? And it's a very important discussion because many people have it completely backwards. what a cult is and what a community is. And so it's an important discussion in what we're up to here, because if we want to be out there and be the change makers, it's important that we're completely just loving and neutral no matter what people choose around us, okay? And that's not always true in a cult consciousness, but in a real true community consciousness, it is. So I'm actually going to, I don't think I have it open, but I'm going to open the graphics for you to see. Week 7, here it is. I think, yeah, there it is. All right, I'm going to share this image that will kind of, and I'm going to talk about it, about the difference between cult and community, so you can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here. So, and I'll speak and read it, so if you are on the phone, you'll still kind of understand the conversation. Okay, so relationships, we're talking about transformation happens in relationships. So a community actually fosters relationships. A community's fundamental function is to foster better relationships, specifically those closest to us, like fostering, better relationship with our brother, our mother, our sister, our father, our kids, like all that. A community is there to foster that kind of relationship, okay? Whereas a cult, by definition, actually ruins relationship. So it cuts you off usually from your friends and family, and it creates conflict and disagreements and arguments. And it's like, because your family may not agree with your cult, then you actually shun your family and they become the enemy. And then you start trying to force your ideology on your family, which is, I think, one of the reasons sometimes that people think that gratitude is a cult is because, there is that transformation that happens, and it's actually scary sometimes for the people close to you. And it's like, they're actually afraid of, like, really what they're afraid of is what we talked about earlier, the oneness and the love, and that it's actually possible to have that, but they don't even see that that's what they're afraid of. They're just afraid of that something is different and it's a threat. And so the best way of describing it for them is actually cult, and they're not seeing that it's the possibility that's there. Okay. And there are actually some students that do and take gratitude that don't really know how to be in relationship because of the drastic change. Mm-hmm. And they do try to push their ideology onto their family, or like you have to do the training. So no wonder they would feel like they've joined a cult. You know what I mean? But that's not what it's about. It's about fostering relationship, which is why we talk about it a lot in the training about take your relationships to the next level. If all your relationships were 10, trust me, they would be like, what are you up to? I'm in. Mm-hmm. But it's like that. Most of our relationships are not a 10, and we get to like keep bringing them and working on that. And that's what a community is for. Then we have a community is a context of love and support. A community is about encouragement and inspiration. And, if you need someone to pick you up, we're going to pick you up. And, we're going to have, if you say you want something, we're going to support you. So it's a context of love and support, whereas a cult is actually a context of fear, guilt, and anger. So they actually, in cults, they actually need to almost make you angry or feel guilty or afraid so that you won't leave the cult, okay? Now, I have been in transformational communities in my past before I started gratitude where I actually felt that. I actually also felt that I spent 3 years in AA a long time ago, and I actually felt that there. I felt guilty if I left, and I'm not saying that AA is a cult, but there was some of the cultish, flavors that were in there that had me feel that way. And for some people, that was the only thing that actually would have them stay, which was actually a good thing for some of them. But it's still that, like, if you do something else, you're gonna die kind of thing. Then there's diversity. In a community, there's diversity. Like, everyone's accepted usually, and it's like we actually thrive with diversity, to learn from each other and to be open to other opinions and learning and all this stuff, right? It's a good thing to be different. And in a cult, usually it's uniformity. So it actually demands that everyone be exactly the same, okay? You should talk the same, dress the same, act the same, all of it. And again, here's another reason why sometimes people get confused with gratitude training being a community context, is because there is a certain language that we actually learn in gratitude, and it's so effective that we cannot not use it. And it is very similar for a lot of people. And that's why we say in part 1, don't go home and talk this talk with your people. Like don't go home and ask your wife or husband what they're committed to, or, you know, all these things. So, because they're not there yet, you know. And then it's funny because now Arian's mother hasn't done the trainings, and she speaks like as if she's done the whole thing now, because we have deep conversations for years. And she's kind of picked up the language because she's realizing that it's effective. And whereas in the beginning she might have been like, what do you mean enrolled? I'm not enrolled, you know, whatever. So it's funny how that works. Community in a community, mistakes are okay, and so, you know, sometimes even like encouraged, like, yes, fall flat on your face, have a breakdown, make mistakes. We're still gonna love you. We're gonna pick you up when you're falling. Okay, get you back up on your feet. Now, in a cult, mistakes are not okay. Usually in a cult, when there's a mistake, they're kicked out. And this is where I had an issue when I was in some other transformational communities, where if someone like broke a ground rule in ML, like just once, they were kicked out. Okay, and they also moralized the ground rules so that like maybe being on time was okay to like not be on time a few times, but if you did the moral sin of sleeping with someone on the team, you're out. Like, meanwhile, they're just neutral rules. And here's this game that's designed for you to fall flat on your face, and then you fall flat on your face and they kick you out.
They have a punishment, yeah.
It doesn't make sense, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why in a community there's forgiveness. There's always the transformation happens in an instant, and it can happen again and again and again. So forgiveness is a key ingredient in a community where, you know, you make a mistake, we're still here with open arms. Sometimes it's like, okay, you need to maybe go work on that for a minute, but we're here, you know. Community critical thinking. So in a community, critical thinking is encouraged. It's about, you know, utilizing critical thinking to determine like where you stand. And like, you know, one of the things that I did during the election was I would purposely read the articles that I was looking for to read, but I would go out of my way to find the ones that I wouldn't have even found because I was so focused on what I wanted to read. But I would go read other stuff so that I would then go pretending like, I'm going to pretend this is the best article. And then I would be able to have critical thinking and be like, wow, I was really kind of way far out there. Maybe there is a common way. And in a cult, it's dictated thinking. It's like, usually you're told what to think. And it's like, don't ask questions. You know, just shut up and follow. Just shut up and follow. And the other thing is, in communities, usually open and welcoming, keeping its doors open and cooperating and welcoming other communities. And it's not like they're bad and we're good, or we do this right and they do that wrong. It's more like just being like open to anything and everything. Whereas usually a cult is seen as closed and aggressive. Usually cults hate outside communication because they're like, it's us against the rest of the world. So they want to be isolated, cut out from the world in a box. And that's kind of a key word we talked about earlier. Like, it's actually like, I look at what we call in the training the drift. The drift is actually operating from cult consciousness more than we even think, which is probably why the drift would project and attack anything that is other than itself as bad and wrong, because that's what cults do. So dictating thinking. close and aggressive. The last one is a community's transformative, and they have transformative and organic practices. That means that in a community, if things evolve, a community is actually open to changing things. In a cult, usually it's static and fixed practices, to the point that like 30 years later, they're wondering why they're still meditating a certain way or doing a certain yoga move that doesn't even work because it hurts their back. You know what I mean? Like they're not even willing to change it. You know, a lot of rigidity. I was going to say religions. They sometimes have had practices that may not, after evolving and growing and whatever, may not actually fit with their beliefs anymore, and it's because this is the way we've always done it. I mean, how many times have we heard our parents say, "This is the way we've always done it"? It's like we're like kind of brought up in that consciousness, So it's very common that within communities, sometimes small little cults are created. Mm-hmm. Same thing within the drift. Small little cults are. So sometimes that's why I asked you earlier, Ruth. I said, actually, I'm going to bring you guys back. I said, did you feel like when you were at one place, you felt guilty that you weren't at the other? Because that's sometimes people have that, where it's like, I used to go to Bikram yoga all the time, but now I'm going to, what's that exercise that you're carrying tires and stuff? CrossFit. And like there's a little bit of guilt that I'm not with that yoga community because they always talk bad about CrossFit, and here I am sneaking out to CrossFit, That's a
great example.
You know what I mean?
It is.
And we actually believe that, like, so there's sometimes like, so within the exercise community, there can be little cultish behaviors, like, well, Bikram is better than, Hot 26 yoga, or, like it becomes this like mini cliques. And I mean, they happen within the gratitude community too, where it's like, well, we have our own, like, we think that the context should be this and this, or that is off context. And I'm like, whose context? You know what I mean? Like, whose context are you talking about? So it's very common that happens.
Can I touch on that?
Yeah, please.
I think another way that it shows up in a cult within a community is we like model what happens in the drift. So for example, if I'm out in the drift and the world is happening and I see somebody that I'm really inspired by. So like, let's say, who's a great person that I can look, let's say I look at Oprah Winfrey and I'm like, oh, Oprah Winfrey is amazing. And how did she become as successful as she is? And how did she grow her empire? And what is her personality like? And I can idolize her and do everything she's done to go create that. And what that does is it's as beautiful as it can be. If that person is creating amazing things in the world, that's not critical thinking. Right. So even like within the community, I can meet all these different people from all these walks of life and be thoroughly inspired by the gifts that the diversity brings to it. And I just can't let go of that habit to latch on to like one person or one leader. But because I'm still within like the gratitude umbrella, I think, oh, look at me, I'm, so I think it's easy to get roped back into, because sometimes it's just easier to latch on to one thought or one person.
Yeah.
And say they inspire me, as opposed to thinking it through and choosing from many.
Yeah, and I think really looking like where you're coming from when you're choosing to, whether you're like, because there's nothing wrong in following, but latching on is a different kind of come from usually. I mean, it's kind of like, how it happens in the real world is I live in Lighthouse Point, and I just moved there, and, it's a little bit above my pay grade, but I got to move in the same street as grandma. So it was like worth it. So I can like drive around at Christmas time and I look at these elaborate like Christmas decorations that is like, I mean, it's, I can't even, probably like $20,000 just to put up the lights for Christmas, and I could actually fall into that and just be like, I can't afford to spend that, but maybe I should take a loan because I need to conform to where I'm at.
Keeping up with the Joneses.
You know what I mean? keeping up with the Joneses. That's actually cultish behavior and cultish mentality, you know? And from my part, if I feel like I need to do that to fit in, or, you know, when I'm going to go to the Christmas party, I better make sure I tell them, oh, did you see my lights over there, whatever, you know? Now, luckily, I don't fall into that trap, but I see people that do, you know, and they suddenly spend beyond their capability just to fit in. So, and the scary thing is, even the other people may be like, oh, look at that person doesn't have anything, and they actually do the actions of that cultish behavior, and it happens in all our life. So basically, a cult mentality actually has you set aside your principles to conform. So even if you are in a place that maybe, let's say that you're in a place where your principles are aligned, but if it involves you in any way, shape, or form feeling guilty to leave, or, you know, all those other things, just check in on yourself and check in, like, are you in the most effective, what you thought, effective community that you can be in, you know? I think it's important that and that's kind of where the critical thinking comes in. You know, I wrote a lot of this during the elections, and it was during the heightened time of where none of the camps in my book were coming from love consciousness. So whether it was the Democrats or the Republicans, you know, Hillary or Trump, like, I felt like none of them were coming from where I want a leader to come from and a community to come from, you know, and I saw all this cultish behavior, like the fear-based, you know, the attack, the mistakes are not okay.
Following of one person.
Following one person, yeah. It ruined relationships. Like, I had people on my street where the husband was a Trump fan and the wife was a Hillary fan, and it started ruining the I mean, it was insane to see what was going on. And I mean, a lot of it's still going on today. But I think that's kind of what the world we live in today, you know? Even looking at Medicare, I mean, no, like, what's that called? Insurance, like, yeah, but not even politically. Like, I come from Sweden, where it's free to go to the doctor and it's free to have your kids in daycare. You know, between, like, I'm gonna have 2 kids soon, and insurance for everyone, I mean, we're up to $2,500 a month just to have a really bad insurance and having kids in daycare, which is actually free in most other countries. And so it just baffles me that as a country, like, that's not community living. Community living is like me signing up to bring food to someone in the community that's having a baby in a week. That's community living. And, like, everybody in the community comes and gives her food and she doesn't have to think about it. And, you know, what if we can look at healthcare that way? What if we can look at all these things that way? What would it really be like? And how can we be the catalyst for that to happen? Not just, I guess this is the way it is. You know what I mean? So I know I've been talking a lot, so I'm just going to open up a little bit and to hear if there's anything that you guys are hearing or that you want to share about, like, or have you ever belonged to a cult in your life? Maybe you have a story that you want to share. Are you part of any powerful communities? When do you buy into the cult consciousness? You know, anything that has been revealed for you in this conversation. And I know, again, I just gave you a lot, didn't I? Yeah, we're all just live now, so you can just talk.
Oh, okay. One of my thoughts as you were talking was, now I know my problem. I don't fit in because I'm always changing. My reputation has always been, what is Ruth up to now? So, you know, in trying new things or, you know, whatever. So, yeah, so I guess I never, well, in my upbringing, the thing I can identify most with would be the church that I was raised in being cultish. from what you've said, with guilt and, you do things this way, you don't, no diversity or whatever. And that's the only thing I can really think of. And so, and I've grown out of that.
Yeah. And even though we grow out of it, it can still influence unconsciously.
Oh, yeah, it's still there. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just make different choices.
I think when I first saw this chart and the definition, even as Joe is going through each category right now, she says, well, a cult will do this, a cult will do this, a cult. I noticed that my mind automatically filters cult as negative. Like, oh, what she's about to say is negative. And so something I've had to put into my thinking is, wow, that's based on the definition. That's a cult behavior based on the definition. That's a cult set of actions. But I had to keep redirecting because that word is not neutral for me. It's just not. Like, it's been a steady practice of saying based on the definition, based on the definition, based on the definition. And it took some time, but there's so many layers to it. That's why I love it, because you can apply it to anything and check in and say, am I a critically thinking leader?
Yeah, I mean, you could look at, they've even joked about it, like the cult of Apple. They even call it that themselves. And it's like, you can actually take a lot of the distinctions within cult, but if it's coming from pure choice, there actually may be ways that can be effective to create certain brands. They actually call it cult branding in marketing. So there are ways that can be effective. So yeah, it's not necessarily a good thing or a bad thing. It's more like, what's effective for you and where do you want to be? And are you actually choosing, or are you just blowing with the wind? I don't know if that's a saying. How do you say it?
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough.
That's how you say it.
I pull my Swedish card. Jackie or Sean, you have anything?
No, I don't have anything.
No. Jackie looks like she's got a lot in her mind, though.
It's really.
All right, so we're going to wrap up now. I believe I'll send you this chart in the email. I think I do, and if I don't, I will. And we are going to talk about the homework. So next week, read chapter 10 on community in the Source Movement book. I actually do have an example about CrossFit in there. So, yep. And the mentalism homework is, so this is actually really cool. So try to really presence this week. As you participate in the world this week, notice if you're surrounded by community consciousness or cult consciousness. So be aware, to like how people are talking or what you're seeing. How is it in your family? Are you raising your kid with the cult consciousness? Because a lot of us are like this dominate control environment, or whatever it is. And then see like if you feel like there's anything you want to nudge and switch or shift or whatever, and bring it to the next week, and we'll talk about it. Next week is our last session, so we will graduate you officially. So we'll share a little bit, and then we're just going to kind of go through a little graduation thing, and then we're going to be complete. Yay! Any questions, anyone? We're good? Now go dream about cults.
Okay.
Thank you.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid. I promised myself I wouldn't make that joke, but I just did. Just because the history of that is actually really
I didn't know
not
the
good.
entire history of
Like
that.
they were killing
until a couple
babies with
weeks ago.
Kool-Aid.
Yeah,
So
I had no idea.
anyway, don't dream of that. Dream of community and love. All right. Look at Jackie.
Good night, guys.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.